Julie, I'd like to welcome you to One Step Beyond. And can you tell me where you're speaking to me from? And um, let's start with that. Where are
Yeah.
you speaking to me from?
First off, I'm honored to be here because was looking through some of your podcasts, and the people that you had on seem far more deserving than I am. But I'm happy to be here. So right now, I'm in the Catskills in upstate New York. It's maybe like 30 minutes south of Albany, just to give people an idea of where that is.
Sure. Are you in the northern Catskills up there? If you're only 30 minutes from
Yes.
Albany? Right.
Yes.
What would be your local town? I mean, I'm talking to you from Kingston, which is sort of gateway city from the south to the Catskills.
Well, I'm in East Durham slash Cornwallville, but if we want like a better kind of idea of where I am, so the two major ski resorts near me are Windham Mountain and Hunter
Mhm.
Mountain. So I'm about 15 minutes from Windham and about 30 minutes from Hunter.
Okay. So I think you are sort of special in a couple of ways, but I think partly the reason I wanted to talk to you is that you're also just an every person who has done some special things, which is very much a part of this show. I'm not trying to reach out to people that are super famous athletes. So in some ways, I hope every guest feels a little humbled to be on it because that's part of reaching out to them. But having said that, you have been recently granted an honor that in some ways is really, really common because you're not by any means the first to get the honor, but in other ways it's very uncommon uh, because of the number. What's the honor that you recently got?
So I recently became a member of the Catskill 3500 Club, which is a hiking club here in the Catskills. And in order to gain membership, at least for your initial patch, you have to hike all 35 of the high peaks that they have on a list, though that is now, since I've done it, it's now 33 because they've taken Double Top and Graham off the list that was on private land, and the owners have decided they no longer want to grant access, like permanently. And then you repeat 4 of those in the winter, like 4 specific ones. So I recently was became a member of the club, and I became number 3500. And they're really excited about it. I thought that was really cool, and I really appreciated how excited they were about that, the board members and everything. And they wrote the most like flattering stuff about me. I really loved it. They've been very supportive.
Yeah, so for people who live around here, this is a not uncommon kind of goal. Climbing, for people who live around here and get outdoors, it's not an uncommon goal. It can be a long-term goal, as it is for me. It can be a short-term goal. Some people do it in a season, and I've often wondered, how many people have become members? Because sometimes when you're on a mountain, it seems like everybody around you is busy working on their badge. So now we have the answer. There are now 3,500, and probably
They're 35.
plus a couple since you. Was that entirely coincidence that you were number 3,500?
Yes. Like it was one of the millions of like synchronicities that have happened kind of like on that journey. It was. And they made it a point to stress that this was just based on like when they received my tally sheet and everything. Because I know that like I would post like trail conditions and things like that, and also a little bit about like they knew that kind of like this was part of me getting over my divorce, something that I was doing like a project. So they made it a point to let everyone know that this was just a coincidence and there wasn't any favoritism or anything like that.
Right. Well, we're going to talk about your circumstances more in a moment, because they did publish they publish excerpts from an essay that you've
Hmm.
written that I guess is going to be in a future edition of their newsletter. It's a very it's very well written, which might be a good point for me to ask. What do you do for a living?
Oh, I'm a high school English teacher. So I'm a high school English teacher for the NYC DOE. So I teach in a school in the South Bronx. But this year I was granted medical accommodations to work remotely. So I've been living up in the Catskills pretty much full time. Well, still paying rent in my city apartment, but I've been living up here full time,
Right.
and really taking advantage of being up here in the mountains, like doing stuff in the mountains every day.
I think if you live in the mountains, you'd be a fool not to take advantage of the mountains. But that might possibly explain why your essay is as well written as it is if you are an English teacher. But again, before getting into that too much, I had seen a couple of your you post these very eloquent accounts of pretty much every. I mean, it's almost like you have a public diary on Facebook. You're just sharing your skiing and your hiking. And when you shared your 39th climb, because as you explained, 35 peaks, and then you've got to do 4 specific ones, and that was the one that kind of got me, because you didn't just hike up Panther Mountain in winter. You hiked up it on skis and then skied down it. And there's this amazing picture of you with your skis over it looks like they're over the edge of Giant Ledge, and
Yes.
that really got to me. And then by coincidence, kind of a few days later, I was climbing Halcott, which is one of the bushwhacks, and recording myself a little episode, and I saw somebody had skied down, and I found myself talking about you and say, well, maybe I'll get this person on the show. And then straight after that, the 3500 Club put out their announcement about you, and your story just seemed like a story that took in 2 of the things I really did want to cover on this show, maybe as separate episodes. We'll see what happens from this interview. But one of them is about hiking with a goal, and the other is about backcountry skiing. But as much as anything, it's about taking on these endeavors when you have a personal upheaval in your life, because a big thing about this show is making a change in your life and stepping outside your comfort zone, making a change in your life. So give me your backstory on how you set about this, and what inspired you to these peaks and maybe to the backcountry skiing before, whichever came first.
So on April 28th, 2018, I'll always remember that day. So I come home from work, and my wife was sitting on the corner of the bed, and I mean, she's acting kind of weird, but I was getting ready to go upstate, like which we did every weekend. And she just said to me, I can't do this. And I'm like, what do you mean you can't do this? And I kind of knew what she meant. And instead of clarifying, she just said it kind of like louder and a little bit angrier. She's like, I can't do this. So, I mean, I know that, so we had like an embryo transfer in 2 days. So we had been trying to get pregnant for 1.5 years. I was the one that was trying. I had done IVF and stuff, and then it wasn't working out for me. So I kind of passed the baton on to her. And she had tried once before, and then we were going to try kind of like with our last embryo, and she was going to try, and it was her idea. And so I knew she meant that, but I also knew, in kind of like the way she said it and the way she was acting, that this wasn't just the embryo transfer she was talking about. This was, she does not want to be married anymore. And I mean, I'm blindsiding. It seems like an understatement. I had no idea that this was coming. So it was really like a lot to take in, because I also knew in that instant, like, at the time I was 39, and I'm like, well, yeah, not only am I losing my marriage, but pretty much losing my chances of having a family, at least in the way that I had envisioned it. And I was really like left like completely devastated. I mean, I felt like a complete failure. I felt like totally unlovable. Like, how awful must I be that someone would literally wake up one morning and just kind of like blow up their life, not even want to try and save the marriage. Like, I implored her to, like, let's go to therapy. I'll do anything, whatever you want. We can even take kids off the table. I don't care. Let's just try and save the marriage. And just nothing. She just did not. She was out, and she was done with me. Like, it felt like complete emotional abandonment. So I just felt like an unlovable failure and like a total loser. And these were kind of like the words that I kept saying to myself. And I really just kind of like lost the will, like, to live, like in the weeks like following that. Like, I remember I would just try and like sleep all the time. Like I would take like NyQuil and stuff just repeatedly just to stay unconscious because I could not stand the psychic pain.
So I just want to check I heard you correctly. You said you lost the will to live.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was not in a good place and I was like scared for myself. I mean, I totally was considering suicide and things like that. You know, it was really, really, really bad. But I actually did find I did push myself to go skiing because my ski season ends like in June, on June 1st, because I get my spring pass to Killington. And I did push myself within like a few weeks to like go to Killington and ski. And I skied with a friend there, and like, you know, that was like kind of nice for a little bit. And I was during, you know, one of the moments that I allowed myself to stay awake, I was on the internet and I saw this ad from Powder Quest for a women's backcountry ski camp in Chile that August. And I had zero desire to go, right? Like I didn't want to do anything, like not even skiing. So that says a lot.
Although you were
But
online, you were online looking at like Powder Quest. I mean, you were doing something online that was
I
piquing
was
your
doing
interest in
something
skiing.
totally unrelated
Right.
to skiing, I'm sure. And somehow like this ad popped up and I don't even remember how or where. I just remember this is too much of a coincidence. It actually said, I remember it saying like no experience necessary. And oh, and as kind of like a precursor to this, I had always seen backcountry skiing as like the next evolution in my skiing. But my ex-wife wanted to stay on the resort. So I kind of stayed on the resort with the intention of kind of like going back to it someday. So I was like, oh, this is kind of like too much of a coincidence. So I booked the trip and I go in August. I have a great time. It's an amazing, supportive kind of like, it's all women, it's great. And I got the backcountry bug. So I became obsessed. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
No,
well,
go ahead.
yeah, I want to ask you about the to define the backcountry bug, but I think I want to acknowledge first. I think I think it's brave of you to admit to the dark hole that you found yourself in, but the reality is a lot of people get divorced. I'm divorced. Some people see it coming, some people don't see it coming, but I sometimes think that so many people do get divorced that everybody just assumes it's normal and we're all going to get through it. And my attitude is people who say it's a breeze, that it's easy, are either like they're either some kind of 1% that I'd love to see actually analyzed, or they're kind of being generous with the truth. It is not an easy thing to go through. It's not easy to go through whether you have kids, or I'm sure whether you don't have kids. And even if and I'm going to be honest and say, as was the case with myself, when you agree mutually that you've had a good run, that you know, let's shake hands and move on, then you still might have an entire life to unpack and unravel and try and split up and you know, figure out who gets
Mm-hmm.
what. It is not an easy thing to go through, and I think it does us some good to acknowledge that I can do stories on people who've had legs blown off. I can do stories on people who faced all kinds of challenges, but this is a challenge many of us go through that we don't always get to own up about and talk about how painful it has been and how it can put us in a dark place.
It is, and it takes like a long time to really kind of like heal from that. Even if you're over your ex, healing from the experience is like a totally different thing, you know. So yeah, it's I don't know anyone, even in people that I know, that, you know, they have this like, yeah, we should just go our separate ways. It's just not working out, and it's this mutual agreement. It's always still like a devastating process, and I don't think people realize just maybe like how long it takes. Like especially that year afterwards, it was like someone, you know, died. Like every little thing was a big deal. Going to the supermarket for the first time by myself, well, this is something we used to do in our routine together, was a big deal. You know, obviously like holidays and stuff are a huge deal, but like everything for me was a first time I went hiking with my dog by myself or something like that. Everything. So yeah, especially like after that first year, I mean, that's tough.
But
But
but then
yeah.
having said that, the fates kind of spoke to you, and maybe your computer knew that you were a skier, and it sent you this ad. Because we always wonder sometimes, how does my computer know that I just made that for dinner last night, and it sent you this ad, and you went to Chile, and you got what you called the backcountry bug. And here's where I want to say that I'm a skier. I'm a downhill skier. I have been an avid skier, and almost, although I skied a little bit when I was younger in Europe, most of my skiing has been done in the Catskills in the last 20 years. But it's pretty much all, well, it has, sorry, take that back. It's all been on resort. And I look at backcountry, and I am I'm kind of clueless, but I know I want to do it. So can you describe the backcountry bug? For those of us who know how to downhill ski, what is backcountry and why is it so thrilling?
Okay, so with backcountry, you're essentially climbing what you ski and you're off the resort. So you have special bindings where like your heel will release so that you can walk on them like cross-country skis. And you put this thing on the bottom of your skis. They're called skins. They're like this like nylon mohair kind of like combination, and they prevent you kind of from like going backwards when you're going uphill. So like a lot of times, like I mean, you can bushwhack up a mountain. You can take like, hiking trails and ski down those. Then when you want to climb like bigger mountains, there are more mountaineering skills that are required. Harnesses, crampons, ice axes, things like that, which is like what I've started to get into. Like to me, that's the the ultimate in skiing, and that's like I'm getting bigger and bigger mountains now. But yeah, so you're off the resort, and you're finding spots and locations that you think might be fun to ski, and it's a lot of self-reliance, it's a lot of research, it's a lot of learning new skills. But that's also why backcountry skiers are kind of like they don't give out their information that easily, so yeah, well, we could talk like maybe like more about that in depth about giving up your backcountry spots, because that could be like a whole other thing.
It sounds like
But yeah,
it sounds like mushroom foragers.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess I could kind of see that. Yes.
They're really happy to share their skills. They're not so happy to share their secret stash. That's what you
Exactly.
like.
Exactly.
That's what I find there. One thing. Sorry, just give me a moment there. One thing I think we have to acknowledge about skiing, and this is why I think it's great to talk to you about skiing and hiking. I do love skiing. I will be the first to say it's not a cheap sport.
No.
Equipment is expensive, and even once you manage to get good equipment, and that can take many years, then you've got the cost of getting on the mountains. And
Yes.
so a lot of for a lot of people, it's a rare treat. It's something that's out of their means. And you're mentioning backcountry skiing, and very quickly you're getting into harnesses and equipment, etc. But having said all of that, I have noticed everybody who pays attention has noticed that where we are right now this year in the Catskills, there is more backcountry skiing going on than ever. And I have seen people now, skiing, and I'm reading about people skiing. So is this a sport that's taking off, or is it due to changing circumstances such as, the P word that's gone on this last year?
COVID has definitely increased the interest in backcountry skiing, and there's definitely more traffic out there than there used to be. So I think because now a lot of the resorts had these reservation systems, people were really kind of like nervous about like, being able to get reservations and use their days. And I think a lot of people were just kind of like threw their hands up and were like, oh, screw it, I don't need the resort, I'm gonna go into the backcountry. And so there's been a huge surge in backcountry skiing. Also, there was a huge surge in hiking, this spring and summer. And unfortunately, a lot of the hiking trails and like watering holes and stuff were really trash, like more so than ever before. People, masks, garbage, like it became a lot of problems in a lot of these local towns. Because yeah, it's great you want to come up here, but you know, you also have to respect the environment, right? Because people don't go into the woods to see signs of human beings. People go into the woods to escape signs of human beings. And I think you need to keep that in mind, like when you're out there. I mean, I think, I mean, like some of this just like, I mean, it's kind of weird. Some of this seems just like common sense, like etiquette, like don't, you know, use your iPhone speaker and put in earbuds if you feel the need to listen to music, and don't throw things on the ground, and don't carve things in trees and such. But for some reason, people like need to be educated about that. So don't do any of those things that I just said. And everyone will get along.
I know it's been really, really, really disappointing, and it's not limited to here, because in that brief window of last summer when we were able to take some kinds of vacations, I went up to New Hampshire, and they had exactly the same problems. And in fact, they had a sign up saying people were defecating by the streams, and yeah, and by the way, that sign was in a town called Woodstock by coincidence, but it was like that was down by a stream in a town. I know exactly what you're talking about. It is a real downside. Of the upside, that is, people have used the pandemic to stay closer to home, and you know, got out into the Catskills. Unfortunately, it is a really important part of any discussions we have, that people have to respect nature if they're going to come out.
And I think then it also causes a backlash, right? You know, people that have, you know, been in the mountains and traveling in the mountains prior to COVID. And then you kind of like in like some of these hiking and backcountry groups, you know, you get these people that kind of now want to be gatekeepers and keep people out. And I don't believe in that either. The mountains should be accessible to anybody that respects them. And, you know, when you're kind of like deterring people and are rude to them, you know, people that kind of like, you know, want to get into the outdoors, I don't think that's right either. That's also kind of like why I've, in terms of backcountry skiing, like I've really been trying to kind of like give people the resources and tools that they need, you know, to like get out there. I'm not giving them like coordinates or anything to anything, but I'm definitely like about that, because all this has helped me so much, and I want other people to have that opportunity. And I think that the outdoors can already be very intimidating to some groups of people. I know as a female backcountry skier, I'm often kind of like, you know, a lot of times the lone woman is like a group of men, you know, like if I take my my avalanche safety courses, or sometimes on like if I take a big major ski tour or something like that. And like men, the trend, and it's not all men, but the trend is that men kind of like brag and overstate their abilities. And the trend, at least that I've experienced, is that a lot of women kind of understate them. And then you always have this kind of like feeling like, oh, do I belong? So I think women are more easily intimidated. I think people of color are intimidated, and there's a sense of like, I don't belong. And now you have, you know, people in these like hiking and backcountry groups that are so angry at the people that have come into the mountains and disrespected them, that, you know, they're using language that is even further intimidating, like, you know, people, and kind of like making them hesitant to go into the mountains. And I don't think that's right either. I think so long as you respect them, you have every right to be here.
You do.
So
you do, and I hate to have to ask this again. You're wonderful. You're you are one of the people of your natural gesture. So
sorry, Sita, I will sit on my hands. I'm sorry.
I just have to point that out to you. I'm really sorry, but you'll know if you were
no, it's fine.
If you were wrestling with the audio, you would understand. So to pause, I think you've given us there an ideal segue to go back into your personal story, because you had your own reason to get out into the mountains and get away from resorts. And you had gotten as far as telling me about Chile, and I wanted to just get a better sense of what backcountry skiing really is. And tell me how this, tell all of us how this further helped you get out of that evident hole that you were in. I mean, was it instant? It was as straightforward as, oh, I've got the backcountry bug. I'm recovered from my divorce. Is life that simple?
No, I'm someone that's like very much always in my head and overthinking things. And I feel like the uphill can be very grueling. It is not a pleasant thing. There's a whole other level of like hiking up a mountain and, skinning, which is what we call when you're using your skis to climb up. Um, like skinning adds a whole other level of complexity and makes it way more of a trudge. Like sometimes I see even people in snowshoes. Like sometimes I'm like, God, I kind of wish I was you right now, you know, because it's faster. But it was funny. I had no idea what was driving me to constantly like skin up mountains after that. Like I would wake up at 5:30 in the morning on weekends just to skin up the resort, like at Hunter Mountain, just to stay in practice, right? With my skinning and to keep learning and stuff like that. Because I wasn't really comfortable like going into the Catskills backcountry or anything yet. Like my ex covered the maps. Like she was the navigator. I was just like, whatever, I don't have a head for that. Just point me in the direction to go. Are we going this way? Okay, good. So I wasn't confident about that yet. And there was just something about it. I was like, it's cold, it's windy, it's dark. Why am I getting up to do this? I already get up at 5:30 every day during the week. This makes no sense. And for some reason, I decided to teach King Lear that year. And it's not like my favorite play, but there were some lines from King Lear that I'm like, huh. Like he says, but where the greater malady is fixed, the lesser is scarce felt. So King Lear is like, you know, in the storm, and everyone's trying to get him to come in, and it's true. I guess maybe I had so much kind of like psychological and emotional pain that I wasn't noticing the physical pain, or maybe the physical pain was helping to mitigate or focus less on my psychological pain. I don't know. But it was pain involved physically and emotionally. And maybe there was something cathartic about that, where like you're thinking about your divorce, you're thinking about things that went wrong, and you're climbing. And with the intensity that you're feeling, like these, painful emotions, you're also kind of like exerting yourself physically in an equal amount. So maybe that was it. But I mean, I would listen to audiobooks and stuff, and I would just climb and climb and climb. And something just like kept pushing me to climb mountains.
It's
Um,
it's really fascinating, because in your own way you're describing what my last guest, who's in many ways just so completely different, the guy who for whatever reasons joined the army in Britain, went off to Afghanistan, and in the first month gets his legs blown off, and has subsequently climbed Kilimanjaro, as the first double amputee, above the knee amputee, and he's got a hobby of climbing mountains. He says it's painful, it's horrible when he's on them. He just wants to get off them. He has, and then he gets to the top, and it's worth all of that pain. It's worth everything that you go through. And I just wonder whether it's just deeply buried in our human psyche that we somehow embrace that challenge and the pain of getting up something, whether that is physically, geographically, an uphill gradient on a mountain, or just the emotional mountains that sometimes we set ourselves like these crazy targets, and they're painful, but there's something in the human spirit that says we want to take them on and we want to do them. I don't know, but I'm fascinated.
well, I think whenever we have some sort of a passion or a hobby, we're kind of in some ways experiencing life on this micro scale, but in a way that we can kind of control, right? So when I'm in the mountains and I'm skiing and I'm learning new skills, I can deal with setbacks then, and setbacks motivate me more. You know, I wish I could kind of like carry that over more into the macrocosm of life. But I think that when you have a hobby or a passion and you're consistently practicing that on the micro level, that it will, without you realizing it, start to translate into dealing with, kind of like bigger situations that life throws at you. And I think it's good to practice that. I think the one thing that you have that's you know, easier with dealing with things on a microcosm is that you know when the suffering will end, you know that I will get to the top of this mountain, or, and you can see the end in sight. And also, like, all right, if I don't make it to the top and, the plans change or whatever, it's not as quite as devastating usually as like some, great personal tragedy in your life. But with life, you never know. All right, well, I keep struggling and struggling and struggling. When is the struggle going to end, and when is that going to pay off? And I think that uncertainty is what makes it so much harder to kind of like deal with like these big things in life versus your hobby or your passion that's kind of like on that micro scale. So
Did you find that hiking was hiking uphill and doing the backcountry skiing, was that a chance to put your divorce out of your mind, or would it follow you up there?
oh no, that's all I did was think about that. What can I learn from this? What went wrong? What can I do with this? And that's also like another thing. It's that I've always had skiing. Like skiing is something that like, I always do. And I have this thing for myself. And I think one of the things that I've learned is that it really is important to invest in some sort of passion, interest, hobby, something. Not necessarily to help you like even forget about things, but it gives you a starting point whenever you need to rebuild yourself. And you're going to have some sort of ego death at some point in life, right? And you're going to have it many, many, many times. And you're going to have that ego death. You're going to suffer, but your hobby or your passion or whatever is that starting point in rebuilding yourself and transforming yourself, right? And resurrecting yourself, right? Life is just like this continuous cycle of like ego death, struggle, and hopefully resurrection. And you really need something that's going to give you that starting point for resurrection.
Right. And maybe mountains were a good metaphor, because when I was younger, I thought that life kind of moved on this kind of gradual, I suppose in terms of ease, things would just get easier and easier. So you'd be going more and more downhill, but life would be this like, there'd be like a nice smooth ascent on a graph of like income and happiness, etc. And then it didn't take too long. I think by the end of my teens, I realized that no, life is a series of rolling hills, and
Yeah.
there are all these troughs in between your peaks. And if that graph is meant to eventually go upwards, well, hopefully at the end of your life, the graph is considerably higher than when you started your life. But it's not going to be a straight line. There's just no way it's going to be a straight line, right?
It's like hiking Panther from Fox Hollow. It's a series of false summits, and it could be psychologically demoralizing.
Yeah, that was how I spent my Saturday. Yes.
Yes, I know.
Fortunately, I knew about the full summits. I think in my early teens, I didn't know that life had full summits, but I was aware of those full summits. But yes, life is full of full summits. I think that's one way of putting it. So for you, I guess it's a chance to escape outdoors, but you can't escape from the pains of certain personal things, and you just have to
No.
embrace them, I guess. And
Yeah, I don't look to escape. And actually something that I found really interesting is that I'm always looking to challenge myself and have like all this kind of like type 2 kind of adventure like in my free time. And type 2 adventure is like the stuff that's like not fun while you're doing it, but you're kind of glad that you did it. And you know, like that saying, like, you know, God gives you what you want. I'm like, do I really seek to, like, on some sort of unconscious level, like struggle in life? You know, because look at what I do in my free time. I like choose struggle. Um, I don't know. That was just kind of like one of my like uphill musings yesterday. So it's just gonna leave that with you. But yeah, I don't know. I guess because then, you know, you go through something hard and you feel so low. And then like when you feel good again, it's like, wow, I can't believe I put myself in a position where I can like feel good again. And you just feel so proud and accomplished. And it makes it worth it.
For somebody,
Well,
yeah, carry on.
I mean, there are two things that I need to do to get over something. One, you need to rebuild yourself, right? So that's why I have like skiing and stuff. And then two, I need to apply what I've learned and pay it forward in some way, or utilize it. And I think that's like my next kind of like step, is I've been trying to figure out how to kind of like pay this forward. I think that's why I've also gotten interested in kind of like helping get others out there, like the backcountry or hiking or in the mountains, because like that's my way of like, you know what, I went through this, this helped me, this might help you. Let me tell you what you need to know, you know.
Great. So for anyone who is looking to start out on that, and somebody who maybe has the basics of skiing, or maybe they don't have the basics of skiing, how can they learn backcountry skiing? Like here, say, you know, on the East Coast, or indeed out west. I mean, how can somebody learn? I guess in your backyard, if you have some mountains, how do you learn backcountry skiing?
That's a good question. I recently kind of like gave my friend Greg Valencia and I gave like a free kind of like little backcountry clinic. Um, so assuming that you have the touring gear, though, you can still get out into the backcountry without ski touring gear. You can always just invest in snowshoes and carry your skis on your backpack with like your boots in the bindings. So you don't need to buy the ski touring gear. And in fact, I recommend even maybe starting that way, because then you know if you like it or not. Do you like that trudge uphill? Because you better love the trudge uphill and be able to find some like joy in that, or reward in that. Otherwise, it's not going to be for you. Um, so that's a good way to start, and your cheapest way to start. Then let's say you do invest in ski touring gear. See, that's where it kind of like gets hard. So if you take your ARI 1 course, so ARI is the American Institute of Avalanche Research Education. So they offer courses in, there's two courses, two levels of courses, ARI 1, ARI 2. ARI 1 will teach you how to plan a backcountry ski tour. They're not going to teach you how to use your equipment, though. It's kind of like assume that you already know that. Let's see. I actually, even though the backcountry ski camp said you don't need any experience necessary, like that's not how I roll. So I was like, okay, I bought all my equipment, and I went on, watched YouTube videos and stuff like that. And actually by the time I got there, I was like, all right, I understand how my bindings work and how to get them into uphill and downhill mode. I know how to put my skins on the bottom. I cut them using a YouTube video, and I mean, I would just walk uphill. So, but yeah, I mean, that was a resource that I used. In terms of finding terrain, that's really what people want to know, right? They're like, whatever, I'll figure out my equipment. Tell me how to find backcountry zones. So my hiking was really kind of like a way of finding territory to backcountry ski. So my Area 1 course like gave me some basics on like how to use maps and stuff. Your Area 1 courses usually say like use CalTopo, which is an app you can use. I love FatMap. Sometimes people don't like that because it's like $30 a year, but I think it is like the best like app for navigation. And it always, your phone is a GPS device, and I think people were scared off by GPS, because like those early devices, kind of like back in the day, were like always wrong and like hard to use and stuff like that. Your phone is an amazing GPS device, and regardless of whether or not you have Wi-Fi or a signal, it will track where you are. So you can download the map ahead of time. It shows you where you are all the time as this red dot, so you always know where you are. And so you can put in waypoints. So like the instant I go into a parking spot, I zoom in as much as I can. I put in a pin by pressing down on my phone. I put parking. Now I always know where my car is parked. Even if I get like way lost, I can head towards my car. And that made me feel safe immediately. It also has different layers you can put on. Topographic layer. It'll tell you the steepness of the terrain. It'll tell you, you can put in a layer for like avalanche danger. You can put in a layer for, like it'll tell you like where the sun is hitting like specific like areas. So it gives you all this information, which backcountry skiers really need more so than like hikers. And I've noticed that there is this huge divide between hikers and backcountry skiers in terms of what they use as their primary mode of navigation. So you should always have a backup mode, right? But a lot of hikers are like map and compass, only way, no other way to navigate in the backcountry. Using technology is stupid. Like they're practically like Luddites about it. Unfortunately, I mean, that's not entirely accurate. Your compass can fail. Even if you look on the New York, the NYNJTC, like those maps, they'll even say something, and I've looked at it, about how like there's a lot of iron in the rocks in the Catskills that throw off your compass bearings.
So
and I know that when I was on Panther, because when I was on Panther, I also had a project that I was doing over the summer where I was finding plane crashes, and I was doing a bushwhack on Panther to a plane crash there, and I was like, oh, my compass is off. Really glad I have my phone. So yeah. So anyway, it makes it really easy to kind of like find where you are, and it's kind of idiot proof, more so than a map and compass are.
Right.
But I know that in a lot of hiking groups, I was just looking at one today where people were like, oh, these mountains were better when people just used a map and compass. It kept a lot of the people away. Now everyone's there with their GPS devices and the mountains are getting crowded, and, you know, kind of like they don't belong there. Like,
well, you know, there's a little bit of NIMBYism there. And there's also a great saying at Burning Man, which is when anybody's new to Burning Man, you just greet them and you go, oh, welcome to Burning Man. It was better last year. And you just like, like you just do that, and it's all out in the open. It's a bit of a joke, and it's to make them feel like they're a little late to the party. I think, you know,
right.
The fact is the world changes, people discover things. We have to adapt, and then this conversation is much more about how we adapt and treat nature with respect, and deal with the fact that if our mountains are more popular, I'm sure it's the same in all over America right now, probably all over the world.
It is.
A lot of people getting out in their backyard, which is fantastic, and you know, hopefully less of a carbon footprint as a result. To me, so the hiking up with your skis, like you're saying, you can put them on your back, or you can have the bindings that you know, let your heel out. Does that therefore mean that when you come down, you are going to be coming down like a teleskier with your heels out?
No, I can put it into downhill mode.
Right. So those same bindings can then be snapped into a downhill mode, and you come down like regular downhill skiing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's okay. So, and I'm asking partly because the skis I bought years ago that I had tried out in California have the little holes to attach skins. But you know, my bindings are downhill bindings, so that takes care of me trying to kind of get uphill. I probably want to put them on my back or figure out.
Yeah, I think I've never tried these, but I've seen ads for these thing called day makers, which kind of like I think they take your like regular alpine bindings and turn them somehow, they can allow you to go uphill on them. I'm not sure how they work, but day makers, I've seen them.
Right. And there are multiple options, like the guy I saw on Overlook just 10 days ago who was on a split board, which is a snowboard that literally kind of splits in half, and that way he could hike up on his board. Always, supply meets demand or demand meets supply, whatever it is. But to me, it seems like the harder part is figuring out your downhill, because of course the beauty of a resort is they carve out the hill. They not only carve out the runs for you, but they groom them, or they don't groom them, but they let you know what's on them. And not for nothing, they can make snow when there's not enough snow. So how do you choose how to come down one of these backcountry mountains?
That's the biggest struggle in the Catskills and a lot of places in the Northeast is the downhill. The uphill is the easy part. It's always the downhill that I dread. So with few exceptions, the downhill isn't totally fun. There are some that I go where I'm like, I know this is just gonna be type 1 downhill fun. And there are others I know I'm like, oh, it's gonna suck. So then most of them are kind of like that level. The trees are so tight in the Catskills, and just in the Northeast in general, really. So it's, I was even so the Kennard brothers are the first to unofficially kind of like ski all 35 of the high peaks that are on the Catskills 3500 list. And I emailed one of them the other day, just like asked, I was like, yeah, did you keep your skis on, the entire time? He's like, yeah, car to like Summit and back. And I was like, okay. He goes, well, but he did have to take them off at times, right? Because sometimes you have to like climb up a ledge or a cliff or something like that, or come down one. And so you have to take off your skis. But he even said that, the downhill is the hardest part. Because I said to him, I'm really far more interested in your downhill than your uphill. I haven't set any rules for myself. I know I'm just kind of like out there exploring the high peaks right now. I mean, there are parts where like Cody Townsend says, you just keep going until it doesn't make sense anymore. And like I'll always summit, but there are parts where like, so you have like these trenches that are created, especially on the ones that have trails, and usually like the vegetation is really thick on the sides, so it's really hard to go off on the sides and get out of the trench, but you're also in a narrow trench, and sometimes that's been like frozen over. So now you have kind of like a loose track, and now you have to go down in this, and you can't turn when you want to, and the turns in the trenches are like, really tight, and you're literally kind of like this going between trees. I have footage of myself like that this weekend doing that. It's a pain. Like a lot of times I'm just like, all right, I can let my skis go from here to there. There seems to be an opening on the side. I can like break through the trench and just stop there. Sometimes it makes more sense to kind of like in some parts keep my skins on and myself in uphill mode, because that'll slow me down and kind of like maneuver the trench in that way. That's kind of like a tip. But I found that the bushwhack hikes tend to be a little bit more friendly when it comes to skiing. It's a little bit easier to kind of like get out of that trench and find some open terrain. But you're always going to have like these parts where I'm like, this doesn't even make sense. I'm just going to put, for this part, my skis on my back, and I need to like put on my crampons and like walk down a little bit.
Right, because the Catskills are full of ledges and rock faces and the kind of things that you see people on professional videos jumping off of. They're not just, it's not, and as you say, our trees are very, very close together. It's only when somebody from here gets to go out west and realizes, oh, you can ski above the tree lines out west, or they've got trees that are far and few between, so you can claim you've been skiing in the trees when in fact it would look like somebody had denuded the Catskill Mountains.
Yeah, seriously. Like in Vermont, and like New Hampshire, there are like these organizations that do kind of like clear away some of the trees to make them more skiable. And then also like you have some terrain that is above tree line, but it's still pretty dense in there. Like when you're in the trees, and if it hasn't been kind of like cleared out a little bit by like some of these organizations. But yeah, in the Catskills, like the downhill can be really tough. I just did Friday and Balsam Cap this past weekend, and Balsam Cap has Friday and Balsam Cap have a lot of cliffs. I definitely had to. There are definitely parts that like I boot packed like very close to like the summit. Um, and like those cliffs you can't even like jump off of. That's like ridiculous. You don't have any. They're way too high, and like you don't have the landing or the clearance or anything. There are some cliffs you can, but they're not there.
So I want to
So
ask you,
yeah.
you're making this sound so different, so really challenging. Have you had any bad injuries with your skiing? Even any injuries?
Oh, yeah. I mean, like not recently, fortunately, but I mean, let's see. I almost died in Argentina when I was about 27. I uh I was stupid. I wasn't wearing a helmet or like I was inexperienced, but I was like full send. I don't care. I'll do whatever. And I was skiing down a couloir and I fell near the top. I wasn't wearing a helmet and I wasn't wearing my backpack, so I had like no protection. And I was hitting these rocks on the way down. And you know, like in like cartoons where you have like that snowball that keeps
Yeah,
spinning faster and getting
yeah.
bigger. It's exactly what I thought about um, as I was falling because it was just uncontrollable. Tried to self arrest, it didn't work. And I was actually uh, at one point going downhill on my back with my head down the fall line. So my
Oh
head
God.
was like, and I look over my shoulder and I see this rock. It looks like a giant stalagmite coming out of the ground, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm about to hit that. Like I'm about to die. And I was like, huh. And I remember at the time, like this thought came into my head. I was like, huh, I thought that I had more to do as a teacher here in life. I was like, all right. And I was like, all right, well, maybe I can try to kind of like lift my head up, but I'm going to hit it with my spine and I'm going to be paralyzed. So I did do that. And I hit the rock and it was like seriously like a couple inches from my spine. So I survived that somehow, but I still kept on like a pinball, like hitting stuff on the way down. And then eventually I stopped and I wasn't sure if I had internal bleeding or not. I was like going into shock and like it turns out that like I broke my ribs and collapsed my lung and stuff. But people were there really fast and they did an investigation. Like I had followed this like woman down who was kind of reckless and she was like I went on some sort of like group vacation and I just met this woman on the vacation and the night before at the bar she was just like, oh, when I ski I just want to be terrified. I just love being terrified. So I don't know why I thought I should follow this woman, but apparently one of the people that worked there had actually called ski patrol ahead of time because the conditions were so bad. I was like, you should like get ready. So they were actually there like faster than I expected them to be, and
Well, that's good news.
it
So
was a
I've,
whole
yeah,
adventure.
yeah.
But I've also had a brain trauma. Like my brain was bleeding in two places, and I've had a full ACL replacement. Like I have a cadaver ACL in my left knee. Those are my major injuries.
All right. So anybody who's hearing this,
I
you've probably outdone me in injuries, and I would say mine are all because I'm just not good enough. Why the hell would you keep? Why the hell would you keep doing this?
don't know. I don't know. I guess I also don't like um, things that I'm afraid about holding me back. And I guess I just felt like I could maybe not make poor decisions in the future. and you know, I've become a very cautious downhill skier. Like when I'm unfamiliar with something, I very much take it like slow, and I'm very cautious, and I take very calculated risks now. And in the Catskills, I can go out and explore by myself. In fact, this weekend was the first time that I went out with a friend to do Friday and Balsam Cap. Otherwise, I'm always alone,
I
and it
wanted
allows
to,
me to take.
yeah. I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I did want to ask about that because you mentioned that in your essay, and you sound in this interview so sociable, so friendly, so you sound very extroverted. You really do. like outgoing person, but you write that you are by nature a loner, and that was part of why that whole marital breakup was so damn hard for you. And you are just
Yeah.
confirming that you do pretty much all your adventures on your own. And
Yeah.
yeah, so
Well,
so you are a loner, huh?
I'm a loner and an introvert. Like social interaction definitely is something that is like kind of like it drains more than recharges. And my job is very social, right? I'm a teacher, so I kind of have to be on all the time. So then when I have my free time, I'm very choosy about who I spend my free time with, because I know that I need to recharge in order to be like top of my game when I'm teaching. Um, and I like the Catskills because like I don't have to worry about avalanche terrain really. But that's not to say that things can't slide. I know that there are mountains here that can slide. And people, and I think the hikers don't realize that, but there are things where that I've seen, I'm like, that that could slide, but generally not, because the vegetation is so dense and it acts like an anchor for the snow. But anyway, yeah, I generally tend to do these things by myself, and it allows me to kind of like utilize these skills that I've learned on like my big tours and kind of like put them to practice on my own. And then I also just really love being in the woods by myself. I've kind of like, there's like a stillness and like a silence that you experience in the woods, and it's kind of like even if you try to meditate or whatever, like in your home, like, oh, the heat goes on, right, or my dog is snoring, or something like that, there isn't that total silence. But when you're in the woods, and I found this very much when I was doing the bushwhacks for the plane crashes, because then I was definitely by myself, and you take the time to kind of like slow down and stop and just be still, take some deep breaths, and you do feel kind of like, I don't know, some sort of like stillness and silence and presence that is ubiquitous. And you kind of realize that there is a stillness or something that's like always present. We just don't notice it because we're going about our day, or we're distracted, or sounds, whatever, kind of like interfere. And like, I think that that's what meditation and contemplative prayer are trying to get us to tap into, is that. And I think that's what kind of like that presence of, if you can believe in that, like what a God is, that there is like a presence, there is something in that stillness. That stillness is a presence. That silence is a presence.
Sure, I hear you. When I did that, and you referenced it, when I snowshoed up Panther from Fox Hollow, and I was breaking trail for the last parts of it, and I'm up high, and nobody else is mad enough to do what I'm doing on Saturday. And I did a lot of listening to podcasts. I like doing that. I like being transported elsewhere, being in two places at once. But there was a point I went, it's time to just be here. And when I was up on those peaks, particularly the full summits, before I encountered the trail coming from the other end, just this total silence up there, and it was just every step I took just sounded so loud by comparison. You're right, it's a presence. I mean, you're aware that you're in silence. It's not emptiness, it's silence. The silence is a thing. It's amazing.
Yes, silence is an existence. It is a thing.
There's a couple of things that come to mind here. You mentioned about getting up early in the morning to skin up Hunter or Wyndham. Is that legal? I mean, the mountains make their own snow. They groom the trails. They're spending money. Do they allow people to just skin up? And do you have to go before they start? Is that the deal?
So there, every mountain has their own rules, and I would never promote or do anything that wouldn't be allowed. Because, like, I mean, like that's my home mountain. I'm not going to do anything to ruin my relationship with them. Um, so I can tell you, like, the rules at Hunter are that you can skin up to 2 hours before the lifts open, right? And lifts open usually like at 9 during the week, and non-holidays, and then 8:30 on weekends and holidays. Now, they recently had a change to their policy, so I'm kind of glad that we're talking about this. So it used to be like, you know, so long as you can skin up 2 trails, Belt Parkway, which I recommend as the less technical and easier line, or East Side Drive. That is a much more technical line. Like it's steeper, it's often icier, and there are moguls. Like when I've done it, I found that I needed like ski crampons, like to feel comfortable doing it. But you used to be able to ski down so long as you went down one of those trails. But now they've changed it so that you cannot ski down before the lifts open. You have to like stay up there until the lifts open, and then you can ski down. So that to me sent the message that the uphill access is pretty much hanging on by a thread. I think like groomers and stuff like that were complaining that, you know, like they almost hit people. So when I see people skiing down before that time, it makes me very nervous because I'm like, look, we are having an unusually snowy year here in the Catskills, but we know that that's not the case most years. And so in order for, you know, if you want to stay in your like skinning practice and shape and stuff like that, you know, we need these resorts to skin up. And let's not do anything to jeopardize that just because we think the rules don't apply to us. And I thought that maybe Ski Patrol was looking the other way and, you know, they were just saying those are the rules, but not really following it. But, you know, Ski Patrol has like said to me, hey, you look like you're having a great time. This woman said this to me once. She says, you look like you're having a great time. Just FYI, if you get up there, don't ski down before 8:30 because we'll have to come and like yell at you, and we don't want to spoil your day. And I'm like, yeah, no problem, of course. But I see people doing it all the time, and it really bothers me.
So it's
like,
a matter.
stop.
It's a matter of you know, obeying the rules, the regulations,
Yes.
and traditions. And just within relation to that, is there any reason that anybody can't backcountry ski the Catskill Mountains, for an example?
No, so long as there's snow on the ground, go and hit the backcountry. So this is what I would recommend if you want to get started. Assuming you know how to use your equipment. What I did was, so catskillmountaineer.com, you go to that homepage, and on the side it says hiking. And he divides it up into like different zones. And you click on one of the zones and it'll tell you like all the mountains there and which like mountains are often kind of like paired together for hiking. And it gives you like coordinates to the trailhead, which by the way, you can put in, you just copy and paste the coordinates and you put that into Google Maps and it'll take you right there. I don't know if everyone realizes you can put coordinates into Google Maps. So I would use that. I would use something like Fat Map or whatever to kind of like, you know, start looking at terrain, what might be fun to ski. And I cannot stress this enough. You have to hike in the off season. So I had on my like travels to Japan last year, I said to my guide, I'm like, teach me everything about navigation and stuff like that. And he did. And then I came back and like COVID, right, caused like that lockdown, you know, NYC public schools closed, and now I'm upstate, and now I'm comfortable navigating my way in the backcountry without assistance. So I just started hiking every day after work. And I was just doing the zones that were like maybe 10 to 15 minutes like away from me. I was obeying COVID rules, and I didn't even care about high peaks. I was just hiking. And then one day, like around May, I was like, well, you know, if I'm doing all this hiking, like literally every day, why don't I see if I can do the high peaks, you know, and become a member of the 3500 Club. And I remember when I was with my ex-wife thinking, oh, that's going to take years to become a member. So I started on May 13th officially, and I was like, I'm not going to count any of, you know, the mountains that I climbed with my ex-wife. I'm going to start over right now. And within less than 4 weeks, I did 25 of the 35. And the only thing that stopped me, like I wasn't even tired. I was just like, yeah, I can Energizer Bunny, keep going. But I had gotten like this like overuse injury, and I kept pushing it and pushing it. And then on Hellcott, like I remember I took Tylenol or something that morning. I was like, all right, you're good enough. Go do Hellcott. And I'm like climbing up Halcott. I'm like, oh crap. I'm like, am I gonna make it down? Like, I'm like, this is really bad. This is like, I cannot walk. I did make it, but I was like, all right, we need to pay attention to this. I'm not gonna be that girl that has to, be rescued just because of my ego or whatever. And I took a few weeks off, and then I finished those 35. I finished my first 35 on double top, and then I picked it up again, when I had to do the winter ones.
Right.
And I
So,
finished off. But I was making a list, right? Like, this might be fun to ski. This might be fun to ski. And then also I was doing lower peaks, um, prior to the 35s and stuff like that, and a lot of bushwhacking and things like that for those plane crashes project. And I would make a list, and then you go and you revisit those places during stick season when the like leaves are off the ground, the leaves are off the trees and stuff like that, and you have a better idea of what it's going to look like in winter. And then you just go back and revisit those zones if you're actually looking for like fun skiing.
right. So
It's essential to do that.
yeah, you've just explained that. When you said you've got a hike in the off season, I was wondering if you meant that's just to stay fit, but now I understand it's about reconnaissance. And so, yeah, I mean, backcountry skiing is a pretty serious endeavor. That, to be honest, anything that you get more serious about just involves, and yeah, it's going to involve a lot more work. And whatever your sport is, it's going to become more like a 4-season thing, and you're going to figure out,
Hmm.
you're going to have to figure out what you're doing in your off season. But that's actually very, very good advice. It doesn't just mean, though, so for somebody like me who is hiking out in winter right now, I'd usually be running the mountains in the other 3 seasons, but I'm going to hike them in winter. I'm like, oh, skiing downhill looks like a lot of fun. There's a lot to take on board. It's not like I can just go put my skis on my back and expect to come down without stopping in the hospital on the way. I mean, there's a lot to take into account.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, people do it. I mean, you can, but I think that's why people are. Backcountry skiing is a very merit-based sport because you've done all this preparation to kind of like decide what you want to ski. One, like finding terrain, two, and also like developing these skills. And this is what I compare it to. So there are some people that'll just be like, give me the coordinates, like they'll message me, give me the coordinates to that, or like where, and I'm actually pretty open because I'm doing like high peaks, so I'm like, yeah, I was on Halcott, like we know it's Halcott, this isn't a secret, like fine, you know. But there are people that are just like kind of like, or they'll post in the group like, any who wants to give me their secret spots for backcountry skiing. And this is like the analogy that I give. It's like, you've studied for your final and you're taking the test, and some like random student that you don't know like taps you and is like, yo, what's the answer? And you're like, boy, bye. No, like, I don't know who you are and you haven't done any work. And why should I give you my answers? I mean, there's a way of approaching it. Like, sometimes people ask me very specific questions about things, and I'm willing to do that, or like ask me for like general advice or guidelines, or like, is there a good place to start? Yes. And I'll also give people like resources and stuff like that. And I'm probably more likely to give it to like women and people of color than honestly, like, like
People like
white
me.
men. Yeah, because like they, like there's more intimidation factors. So I'm willing to give them a bigger lift. But no, like it it depends on the approach. It really does. Like, I mean, I found like a woman's post today in one of the Facebook groups for like Catskill Trails conditions to be kind of like, it was essentially similar, like, give me the answers to the test. And it's just like, girl, no.
Right.
And I was very excited when I did like the clinic last week. There is this like young guy had just been through a breakup, and I was so excited to like help him, in the backcountry. So these aren't like these hard or fast rules. This is like, but it all depends on the approach and how you ask. And I think
Right.
people should be mindful of that.
Well, you would hope they would be, and it's funny. It does make me think of the foragers again because they're going to have a very similar kind of response. Yeah, I put in all the work learning this skill, and I know I found my spots, and you want me to just kind of like give them up so you can come and pick the mushrooms ahead of me. Doesn't work that way. Um,
Right.
but there's a couple of things you're raising that I think are really important about this backcountry process. Number one, you are talking about you've hosted the clinic and you're talking about trying to make this more accessible to women and people of color. Is that something that you are um, doing as a matter of course? Because I think that is wonderful. I'm aware of men bragging. I'm aware of my own privileges, etc., etc. I think it's great. Go out, and also I'm very aware that skiing happens to be a very, very white sport. I mean, let's be honest about it. Yeah, it
Yes.
really, really is. So you're doing your part. So if somebody was uh, yeah, I mean, if somebody was listening to this and is in this area and says, "Hey, I'm female and or I'm a person of color, and you know what, I want some of this accessibility because I haven't felt welcomed." Are you guys doing Is that clinic part of it public, or can they reach out to you somewhere, find you?
Reach out to me because I'm also looking to give kind of like women only clinics and stuff like that. And look, I mean, you're a white male. I'm not going to necessarily just turn you away. Like I'm not like that. I'm just saying that I'm kind of like more inclined to like give like a bigger lift to people that I think like have more obstacles in their way. Um, I give information out to white males all the time about backcountry stuff. I believe, as a teacher does, in giving people resources, but then you have to use the resources, right? Teaching someone to fish rather than just giving them a fish. And another thing with like, I found this in the hiking community and in backcountry skiing. If you kind of like show that you're out there and you're doing this, people are more likely to help you. Like when it came to the plane crashes project over the summer, because like I needed something new after I was done with the initial 35. There's like 40 or something like plane crashes in the Catskills, but like people basically know like, oh, there's one on Catskill High Peak, or like they know like, oh, there's one on like the trail to Stopple Point, and then all the others are like a mystery. Some of the information you can find like on the internet, like enough to find some of them, but for a majority of them you can't. And like there's this guy that was, or a couple people actually, that were kind of like my benefactors. They saw me getting out there and stuff like that, and they would just be like, they won't teach me how to fish. They do want to keep that information to themselves. I'm like, all right, that's fine. But they were like, oh, like sometimes I would ask them a question about something specific or a specific crash, and like they would give me coordinates or something. Or even with the backcountry skiing, like people just kind of like respected that I was out there really taking this seriously and passionate about it, and they would like give me information like out of nowhere. Yeah, so it's like the more you do, the more people are willing to help you, but you have to show that you're willing to do stuff on your own and that you're self-motivated, and then people are more likely to help you.
I think that's true actually in every kind of every form, every medium that we could think of. I think that's kind of like a human thing. We're all happy to help people who are showing some willingness to learn from that help and take it upon themselves. The So what I'm seeing here, we're doing this by Zoom. I can see you. I'm seeing somebody who looks incredibly happy, self-assured, and confident, etc. I and you should kind of you gave a little shrug there, like you weren't quite sure if that's you. I do want to ask though, did this experience of getting out into these mountains, did it ultimately cure what you are freely admitting to be the dark hole that you fell into after the sudden breakup of your marriage? Has it served that purpose when people are
I mean, it has not cured it, because I feel like I kind of like maybe won't be able to fully be over it until I'm able to kind of like apply the things I've learned like to another relationship. And also just I also kind of learned that, um no matter what I achieve on my own, it's not going to compare to the feeling of sharing an experience with someone you love and feel a deep connection with. And I think that's like one of the highest highs you can have in life is that like feeling of connection with someone and sharing in an experience with someone. And every single time, I don't want to admit this because like I am like so happy and with what I've done with things, but every time I achieve something, there is like this tinge of like sadness. Like I know it would be better if I had someone in my life to share this with. And as much as I am like a loner, or I find it maybe like hard to connect people, I'm very selective as to who I let into kind of like my world. There's still that desire to have someone, and I it's like what Christopher McCandless said. He had to go off into the Alaskan wilderness and die of starvation, but towards the end, all he wanted to do was be alone, right? Live off the land and leave society. And then what does he write? In one of his books, is happiness is only real when shared.
Yeah.
And that's something that I learned not only in my marriage, because that's what we had that was really good, is like my ex-wife was an amazing activity partner, and it was really fun to share in experiences. And then I learned like, oh, wow, life can be so much fuller than I realized it could be. But that's also been reinforced in me doing things on my own, and accomplishing things on my own. Is it like I know I could be happier. um, so like I understand how important that is, but I think that's also a valuable lesson to learn, in that, you know, self-aggrandizement and boosting my own ego isn't as rewarding as sharing in things with someone else.
Well, I appreciate that you're sharing those. Happy to share some of those skills and those tips, and particularly for people who you know, as you say, people who maybe just have a few more obstacles in their general path. Would you share with, at least with me afterwards, any ways that people can just, if they want to follow your stories online? I mean, you post a lot of pictures. You write these great little, like I say, it's almost like you got a public diary of your adventures up here. I think I'll make a point of sharing them out. And the essay that you wrote is going to be, I guess, in the spring issue of the Canister, which is the Catskill 3500 Club's magazine. I guess normally they'd have
Yes.
some kind of ceremonies to give out these new patches to, but or have some kind of annual events. But we're all just having to get on and enjoy nature for ourselves, right? During the pandemic, it seems like.
Yes. You know what's so funny about the like diary thing is that I've never been into diaries. People are always like, "Oh, you should journal and stuff," and I would try, and I'm like, I hate journaling. This is just like not for me. But I really liked, like when I have like a good day or I do an adventure, I really liked kind of like telling the story of my day, like just for myself. And then I also realized that people like information on the trails and ski conditions and stuff like that. And that's also something you should do, is like if you're serious about like hiking and backcountry skiing, like you should join some of these like maybe Facebook groups like Catskill's Trail Conditions and Northeast Skiology Group and Backcountry Skiing in the Northeast. Um, because like they offer you like invaluable information, like up to date conditions reports and stuff like that. And I was kind of like posting a little bit story of my day and a little bit like conditions reports. And for some reason, like people in these groups really liked them. And it's still a mystery to me as to why, because like, I don't know, I don't think that they're that interesting. But I'm really flattered that people find them interesting.
Well, well, I think you've had, and it's ongoing, a pretty amazing story, and maybe it's just sort of like setting an example, and maybe it's because the pictures that you show, that you take, you always seem to be just having such a great time. There's always, we haven't even gone into this, and we don't have a time. Maybe one day I'll be doing a separate episode on this. I know you're a big fan of double IPAs as well, and you
Yes.
support the local breweries, and a fair few pictures of you do have yourself enjoying a celebratory beer at the top or the bottom of a mountain.
Yeah, oh, actually that's like a little thing that's unique to me. Is that I found from hiking like over the summer that like people do like après ski, and or like they do something like when they're done. But to me, it actually makes the most sense to do it as I'm about to climb. Um, and I'm like, I have like one beer, like I'm not like getting trashed on the trail or anything like that, or I'll like keep one in my pack. But the um the carbohydrates from the beer absorb really quickly. So like it kind of like prevents you from like bonking or feeling like too depleted on the way up. And then also like, I mean, honestly, like the alcohol kind of gives you a little bit of a mood boost, which also helps on the uphill. And yeah, so that's kind of like my like little unique thing. I wouldn't even post about the beers, but people are like, I mean, especially like, you know, like the men, they're like, what beer did you drink today? So I started including the beer that I drink.
Yeah,
So
but that makes it a fun thing in this world where, like, you know, the beer market is just like crazy, and the IPAs and the experiments are all crazy. It's quite fun. It's quite fun to see, and I hadn't really thought of that before. Thing. I'm more of the après person, but I do know on ultra runs people occasionally there's a beer. I'm going to say this, and then we'll end it. I volunteered at Manitou's Revenge a couple of years, which is the big ultra marathon that goes through 54 miles here, and I volunteered at the last aid station. And what's really interesting of uh, one of the years that we did it, of about the first third of the runners who came through, about half of them asked if we had beer. And then
yeah,
after the first third, they all wanted chicken soup. I mean, or broth or something, you know,
yeah,
but the
something
ones,
salty. Yeah.
yeah, but the ones who were up front, you know, if they weren't going to win the race, they were like, "You guys have an IPA?" But we're like, "What do you want? We got tea, we got soup, we've got with peanut butter sandwiches, we got potatoes." They'd be like, "Any IPA?" So
No,
there's,
it's replenishing.
yeah,
Like my ex-wife was a German athlete, and like the German athlete, I mean, I think they used to drink the non-alcoholic
yeah.
version, but they used to like recuperate with that. But I think I find it better like at the beginning than like at the end, where I'm like actually utilizing everything to help my performance.
Well, maybe I'll
So
check in with some medical expert on how that one pans out. This has been enormous fun. Please do share with me like how people can find you if they want to follow your stories. But I think really what I wanted to get out of it was the sense that we can all find ourselves in a hole. Um, we can dig ourselves out of that hole, and there are these beautiful things that we can do that can get us out of it. And I really wanted to talk about the backcountry skiing as well, because it's certainly in the Catskills such a thing this year, and now I feel like more inspired than ever while we're having this crazy snowy winter. So we'll see what I can do
yes,
about it.
yes, this has been a ton of fun. I really love this.
Thank you, Julie, and have fun with whatever the adventure is that I bet you're doing tomorrow. So you know, have fun out there, and thanks for taking part.
No, my pleasure. My pleasure.
Great. All right, Julie. Bye bye.
All right, bye bye.